Hey, what's up, guys? This is Deron Brown, your host of the podcast Philosophy for Life. I have a unique guest with me today. It's Jeremy Grader. The thing that makes him unique is that today we're going to focus on men's issues, mental health issues that men deal with. He also has a real cool podcast called Fit and Mess. So I thought that was a pretty cool title. But I want to, in this podcast, we're going to dive into a lot of issues that all men deal with on some level. So, Jeremy, can you give yourself a short introduction? Did I leave anything out?
No, I think those are the high points. Yeah, I'm just a guy who's been working really hard for the last decade and a half or so to just be a little better every day than I was yesterday. And along the way, I lost a bunch of weight, became a parent, tried to become a better husband, and just do whatever I can every day to do a little better than I did the day before.
So, you said you've been working on yourself for like the last decade. During that, what triggered you to actually start working on and changing your life, get into self improvement?
Yeah, it was actually the dumbest injury anyone's ever heard of. I literally got out of bed, stepped wrong when I stood up, and my knee buckled, and I went down. And I tried to stand up, but couldn't put any weight on it. And after a number of scans and doctor appointments and physical therapy appointments, it was finally a physical therapist who said, based on your family's history with knee problems and what you've got going on, you really need to get on a bike. And if you don't get on a bike, you're going to end up replacing both of your knees. And I just thought, well, that's crazy. I haven't ridden a bike since I was a kid. Like, why would I start doing that now? I'm in my 30s. And so I was complaining to my brother about it, as I normally did when I was upset about something. And he was the one that said, dummy, all you got to do is get on a bike and start bike commuting. Like, just be the weird guy that rides his bike to work.
Mm.
And for whatever reason, the way he said it and the timing of it, I just immediately owned that identity of the weird guy who rides his bike to work. And so it was in the process of that bike ride that every day I was forced to focus on the moment, to be very present in that moment. Otherwise, I was going to crash into a pothole or a car door or a post or something. And I just loved that. I loved that experience of just being so present. I wasn't focused on all my regrets. I wasn't worried about all my anxieties in the future. And so I started looking for ways to bring that into my daily life, and through a lot of therapy and meditation and learning about just other, self-development practices, I was able to really cultivate more of a life that was more about my existence in the presence, and less worrying about being depressed and being anxious.
Okay, and how old were you when you started this journey?
I must have been, well, my now 13-year-old daughter was a baby. So I must have been early 30s, like 33, 34, or something like that.
Okay, so you were already married at this time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right?
For about 10 years.
Okay, so how has your self improvement journey impacted your relationship?
Well, you'd have to ask my wife. I think it's gotten better. I'm not relying on alcohol to mute my feelings anymore. I'm not making bad choices to wake up and regret. I'm not feeling guilty about not being the kind of person I want to be for her. Like, if anything, I want to. She helps raise the bar for me to want to be better for her and to be a better dad. So, a lot of the things I was doing in the past was, escaping from my feelings, and that made me faster to be argumentative, or deny her feelings, deny my own feelings. And so I think that by really slowing down and being a better part, or a better partner, it's I think it's enriched our relationship, because I'm a better person, and I think that by being a better person, you raise the bar for the entire relationship.
Well, the reason I ask that is because I've been on my own self improvement journey, and I do know that once you start working on yourself, unconsciously, little parts of you start to change, and then it starts to add up, and you become a completely different version of yourself than you were, a year or so from now,
Oh, yeah.
a year ago. With that change, your social group changes for better or for worse. Well, most of the time it's for better, but you do lose people that you love and care about. So I was wondering, like, in your self improvement journey, like, what kind of changes did you see within your social circle?
I mean, it's hard to really measure it, because a lot of things changed as a result. But I definitely was quick to move away from the friends that held me. I don't like to say held me back, but kept me stuck. Right, like the drinking buddies that I would go out with, and drown our sorrows and whine and complain, rather than going and doing something about my problems. I didn't hang out with them as much. But also, this journey helped me become more confident and more willing to try different things. So I actually moved from the city I lived in to a place I'd never been to another country, and became very isolated, which was great because it allowed me to do a lot of this work that is very isolating. It is very lonely work where when you start, and kind of intentionally, right? Like you have to get used to the voices in your head. You have to get comfortable with them. You have to get comfortable with yourself. And actually, we just did an episode about this that we're about to release. That, I sort of recently had this realization that like a lot of the loneliness that I deal with now is because I've been doing some of the most important work of my life alone. And I'm at a point now where I'm ready to invite people in and have them be a part of it, so that it can be an even more rewarding, community building practice, as well as, personal development building practice. So it's terribly lonely for a while because everything you knew is no longer what you want to do. And you have to really, find your way through that maze of who are the people I need to be around that are going to push me to be better, because the other ones are going to keep you right where you were to begin with.
What kind of people are you looking to add to your group?
I mean, right now, the ones I'm hanging out with are, there's a group that I get together with every Sunday morning. We go sit in an icy river for about a half an hour to just, have the cold plunge experience. So there's a lot of, wellness enthusiasts that are doing that. And from there, I met a guy that he's an avid trail runner. And he asked if I ever tried trail running. And I said, I've never run in the woods for anything that wasn't chasing me.
Mm.
Uh, so he invited me to start trail running. So we started doing that. So I've been doing that for about a month. So I'm just looking for the person who's going to say, hey, let's go do something active today. Hey, let's get out of the house. Let's go live life instead of, hiding inside from it.
I'm glad you said that. You said do something active. There's actually a reel that's trending with Joe Rogan. He's talking to some I don't know if it's a mental health guru or what, but she has said that one of the keys to solving mental health is staying active, not thinking about your problems. And I'm just wondering, like, how is your? I know you've lost weight. I've heard on one of your podcasts that you've been on, said you lost some weight, but I wonder, is there like outside of exercise, like what things do you do to stay active and to keep your mind like busy?
Well, I mean, I'm a parent of two children, so I've got plenty to keep my mind busy.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I would echo that concept that activity is the one of the strongest antidotes, one of the strongest antidepressants that I've ever taken. I kind of hit a rock bottom last fall. I lost a job that was, I kind of felt like it was the end of my career. Like, what am I going to do now? I'm going to have to start all over. And I turned to a coach who we had on our show previously. Just reached out to him and I was like, man, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to turn. I'm lost. And he said, and he helped me. He came up with a plan. And a lot of it was, you've got time, right? Like, go move, go to the gym, start, he laid out a plan for me. And I stuck to it. And the crazy part about it was, the more I did it, the more I started adding to it. And not to the point where like I'm now, addicted to the physical activity, but to the point where if I don't do it every day, the voices start, right? The darkness creeps back in. I get a little run down. I start kind of beating myself a little bit. And so I've now gone, I think that must have been October, November. So I'm like 6 months now without a serious depressive episode, which is like a marathon for me. It used to be every few weeks I would need a couple days to recover from something. And now I'm at a point where like, I'm still afraid of it. I'm still afraid it's going to show up, and I'm going to have to get through a long weekend of, going through those feelings or whatever. But for the most part, I feel strong enough every day that I'm like, if it does show up, I feel like I'm ready for it.
Mhm.
And so, what kinds of activities, like I said, trail running, cold plunging is a big one. Just started adding a sauna to my routine. I go to the gym 2 to 3 times a week. Play softball with my kids. Like, again, I've got a 13 and an 8-year-old, so they keep me pretty active too. But yeah, I'm just the more I can be outside too, the better. That's just for me. That's how I like to be. I can't sit on a treadmill in the same room for half
Yeah.
an hour and spin the wheels. So yeah, I'm just always looking for any reason to get outside.
How long have you been dealing with depression?
Well, I'm 47, so about 47 years.
Well, the reason I ask, man, is because a lot of guys looking at you, obviously we are all dealing with some of the same similar issues at some point in our life. But you have a wife, you have a kid. There's a lot of guys on the internet that are lonely. They can't
Yeah,
get a date, let alone a wife.
yeah.
And I'm just curious, like, man, who were you before you met your wife? Like, how were you? Were you more depressed? Were you happy? Like, who were you at that point in your life?
Well, I mean, at that point I was a teenager. I was, 17, 18, had no direction in life, high school dropout, in and out of college, um, you know, selling coffee for a living. Like I was kind of at the beginning.
Mm,
Um, Maybe the more important question is who I was before getting on this journey, because by that point I was already a parent. I was already married for 10 years. I was a homeowner. Like I was kind of at a point where I think a lot of guys that are probably listening to a show like this were, where you're just you've kind of done it, right? Like you did the school thing, you got married, you got kids, you're supposed to be happy. The paycheck's okay. Like everything's supposed to be lined up and you're supposed to be fine, but you're not. You're just really
mm,
empty and fulfilled. And you're starting to wonder, like, what's the point of the rest of this? And I still got, 50, 60, 70 years to go if I'm lucky. What do I do with it? And yeah, it's a tough answer for everybody, but I know that it, for me, has come down to figuring out what is the purpose of this time. What am I here for? What do I want to do with this time? And it took years. I honestly, it was just a few days ago. I think I finally like found the sentence that articulates it, and it's just I want to help people suffer less.
mhm.
That's it. Like the whole point of my podcast. I'm not here to make money. I'm not trying to sell ads. I'm not trying to sell anything. I just want to put something out there so that the guy like me 10, 15 years ago that's going, what do I do next? Where do I turn? I feel super alone, feels a little bit less alone. And here's some ideas that maybe they can try. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but I think that's who I was. Just I was like 70-pound heavier, depressed. I wouldn't say alcoholic, but alcohol dependent person who didn't know how to manage his feelings and didn't know how to live his life and had no direction.
I'm curious because you said that you went to college, you got a job, you found a wife, you got married, you had kids. Just that's pretty much
It's a dream, right?
that's what they say for men. That's how
Right.
you know you're a good man. You know you did what society wanted you to do. You basically lived up to this archetype. A lot of young men, and not only young men, women are also doing the same thing. I don't know if you
Mhm.
noticed, but on my recent shows, I've been having more women on, and then they've said something similar, like, "Hey, I did everything I was supposed to do. I went to school. I married the provider type of guy. He was safe. He did everything that society expects him to do. But I got in my mid 30s or 40s, and I wasn't happy. And they had families, and they divorced their husbands. They divorced them because they weren't happy. There wasn't necessarily anything wrong with the
Mhm.
relationship, but they felt like they weren't being themselves. What I'm wondering is for you, when you were, I guess, fulfilling all these roles, graduating from school, doing all these different things, did you do those things because you felt like those are things you needed to do, or did you feel like, those are things that society pushed you into?
I mean, it's largely society, but I think it was also, I came from a pretty lower middle class upbringing, and there was an element of vine swinging that you sort of jump into, right? Like you get out of school, you get a job, and you need a better one, so you go find the next one, and the bills
Mm.
are piling up, so you got to go get the next one. Um, so I feel like I was just kind of hanging on for a long time, and so I don't know that I was necessarily like I didn't have my eye on the prize of like climbing some corporate ladder and getting somewhere. It was more like, how do I get the next paycheck to cover the bills? Um, so yeah, of course, society plays a part in that, and there's definitely an element of doing the thing that we're trained to do or the thing that we see other people doing and we want to keep up. And that's where that emptiness comes in for a lot of people, is that they don't know what they want because they weren't taught how to figure out what they want or who they are, what their purpose is. They were taught how to become worker bees in the factory, to go get the job, to be somebody who would want to marry them. And yeah, it just kind of corners you into a place where you don't really know how you got there, but there you are. And it all feels hollow because the work is hollow. So the money's hollow. So everything you're buying with it feels hollow because you're not
Mm.
living for a greater purpose that really fuels you and is the reason you get out of bed every day, other than to pay the bills.
You mentioned we spoke about mental health issues, but then you also mentioned alcoholism. Were these things that you saw with other family members growing up? Did you grow up in a household where you saw, like, I guess, people who suffer from depression, or they coped drinking alcohol?
Absolutely. Yeah. I come from a long line of alcoholics that, poured booze on their feelings and their problems. And, yeah, so that was the lesson. And this is something I'm kind of coming to terms with now too, is the lesson there was what to run from. And I still ended up kind of on the same track, and could very well have ended up in a, an alcoholic lifestyle. If I hadn't gotten curious one day and was like, how would I feel if I stopped for a while? and that lasted about 7 years. So, yeah, so I learned all the negative things that come from that, and wanted to break that cycle, and I did.
Mm.
Uh, and now, there's other family traits that I see um, in my future that I'm now running from there, and so it's I've spent a lot of the first part of my life running away from becoming like one parent, and now trying to run away from becoming like the other for different reasons, right? Like I love my parents, but there's things about them that and ways that they live their life that I want to make sure that I don't do, and take the actions that put me in the place where I want to be, rather than where I don't want to be.
Yeah, yeah, I get exactly what you're saying. I come from a family, not too many, but there were. I had a few family members that were alcoholics, and basically seeing them, seeing how alcohol affected them,
Hmm.
how they would abuse family members or shout out people out of
Yeah.
fear and anger.
Yeah.
Growing up seeing that, it's going to do two things. It's either going to make you not want to touch alcohol, or it's just going to make you're just going to copy it, which I
Right.
have to have family members copy it as well.
Yeah.
You know, so I completely get that. No, growing up trying not to. First off, when you're a kid, when you're a young man, you have an idea of what you think is better.
Hmm.
So obviously, not being an alcoholic is a good thing. But
Right.
there were also family traits that I did not like, or just male masculine traits that I didn't like, that I thought
Hmm.
were toxic.
Yeah.
And then when I got older, I got to understand myself better. Um, Pretty much doing this self journey like you, reading books, doing things like that,
Yeah.
that I realized that it was easier for me to empathize with other men in my family that I kind of judged at some point in time, because I
Mm.
can understand how they felt, even
Yeah.
though I may not had agreed with some of their decisions, but because I could resonate with how they were feeling on a deep level, it was easier for me to forgive them for certain things. Like, okay, like I came from a position of understanding than judging.
Did you find that learning how to relate in those feelings was new? Like, did you grow up in a situation where feelings were taught, and you were taught to be self-aware, and know how to deal with those feelings?
Um, I never grew up in a I was never in a situation where I felt like I couldn't freely express myself.
Oh, that's good.
Um, I um, I grew up in a pretty rough area. My hometown was murder capital in the '90s.
Yeah.
So at that time, boundaries was something that they taught kids a lot,
Mhm.
like standing up for yourself verbally, physically. Even the schools, they would teach you, like, you have to learn how to stand up for yourself. Like, for example, I'll give you an example of like something that happened when I was a kid. I had a teacher called Mr. Owen. So one day, a parent walks into our classroom. He's yelling, he's cussing. Huge dude, right? He's just cussing at Mr. Owens about something with his son.
Mhm.
And we're about like 9 at the time. And then Mr. Owens doesn't say anything to him. All he does is he asks the kids to stand up, and he tells us to push our chairs, our tables. So we had like the chairs with the desk,
Oh yeah.
push our desk to the wall.
Yeah.
And then he was basically creating space for a violent situation to possibly happen. So
Wow.
Mr. Owens, he after there's space, he puts his hands in his pocket, he looks at the father, looks at him, pissed off, and then he just walks away. So I grew up in an area where they really encourage kids to stand up for themselves, to set those boundaries. And not only that, I also grew up in an area where today we see, when we talk about masculinity, a lot of guys, they think a guy that's loud, who has
Mhm.
muscles, who's flashy, that's masculine. But I
Right.
grew up in an environment where, because it was chaotic, that I saw different types of masculinity, and I saw it expressed in multiple different ways.
Mhm.
You know, one thing that back to your question, one thing that because the family member that was an alcoholic,
Yeah.
I did notice that when I was stay at his household, that some of the family members were just really walking on eggshells, man.
Yeah.
A lot of anxiety. That guy was always in and out of prison. I try my best not to expose him. He's always in and
Sure.
out of
Yeah, I know.
prison.
I know the feeling. I know the feeling.
You know, and there was just a lot of anxiety in the household. And when he was locked up, people were happy, and then when he got out, they weren't happy.
Yeah.
It was a home of fear.
Yep.
So for them, there was it was definitely, I saw how being in that environment, it affected those kids, like, socially and mentally. Like, they felt like they could never that person was so tyrannical that it would not allow another person to really grow and blossom. So
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
people, they were like shells of themselves, and I saw the impacts of that.
Yeah, I experienced that, like growing up, with an alcoholic parent. Like it's brutal. The fear, the instability, the walking home from school every day, afraid of what I was going to find when I got there.
Mm-hmm.
It messed me up, and it took a lot of years. I mean, literally in the last couple of years, I was finally able to quiet the negative voices in my head that, constantly beat me up and told me how worthless I was and how stupid I was and I wasn't good enough for anybody. Like that, I did the work, and that's done. That's gone.
Yeah.
But that, I know where that came from. And, it's funny. I was at my mom's house for Thanksgiving. I think it was last year. And, I'm sitting there watching her prepare this grand meal for everybody, 4 different lasagnas for every different dietary need and all these things. And the whole time she's downplaying all of them. Like, oh, this one's been sitting out. It's going to be cold. This one's going to be watery. Like, oh, I'm sorry. It's probably not going to be good. And I'm watching everybody going up for seconds and thirds. And I'm like, that's the voice in my head that's always like, oh, just showing up's enough. Like, you got set the bar nice and low. And nothing against my mom. She learned it from somewhere else, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
love my mom. She did, she did the best she could. And then I don't fault her, and I'm not trying to throw her under the bus, but it was just so wild to hear and see the embodiment of this voice that I carry around. That's like, if I can just convince everybody that like I did my best, then maybe they'll, forgive a little bit if I'm not perfect. And it was just, I put all these pieces together of her and the way she talks and the way that my dad talks and other grownups in my life that, as I was growing up, the things that they said, I embodied as that is me. Even though they're saying it, I don't separate myself from them. So those words are as much about me as they are about them. And it taught me really quick about like, be double extra careful about the way I talk around my kids, because whatever I'm saying about myself, they're going to believe to be true about them, because if it's true about dad, it must be true about me. So it's crazy how much that stuff, that just being exposed to it, just being around it as a child, it can
Yeah.
take decades to undo that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It's you're taking me back, because kids do pay attention to how you
Yeah.
carry yourself, and they'll start copying you.
Yep.
They'll start mimicking you as they're walking around the house, and
Yep.
using the same phrases that you say. But it does, growing up in those type of environments, they definitely do have a major impact on you. I remember when I was about 18, I just said, this person's my father too. I was trying not to say it, man. But when I was 18, my father, he asked,
You and
he
I are
asked,
going to start a podcast. It's called Daddy
yeah,
Issues, and we're just going to get this
yeah.
done.
My pops, he asked my mom, he's like, hey, why don't my son want to come and stay with me anymore? Because when I was 14, I was already grown. By the time I had enough sense, I had a little bit say of what I wanted to do. And he had just got out of prison. I was 14, and I just saw how miserable people were, and I was just like, you know what? I don't want to be around this. I'm cool.
Yeah.
And so I never went over there again. Right? I never stayed over his house. He would come to my games. He was supportive, but I did not want to be around him when he was drinking. He was around a family. So anyways, he asked my mom when I was 18 why I don't want to stay with him, and she already knew, but she said you should speak to him. He gave me a call. I said, "Are you ready? Do you want to really have this conversation?" He said, "Yeah, I really want to know, man." And my dad's like I'm a big dude. I'm like 6'3". My dad's like 3 times, well, twice as big as me, maybe
Okay.
3 times, but he's a huge dude.
Right.
And he loves it. He's huge. He's tyrannical. He wants to scare people, and he wants to make everybody. I don't know. I don't have that mentality, so it's hard for me to really
Yeah.
resonate with it. But he wants to make people. If a person around him like glows and feels powerful, it makes him feel. It makes him feel like his light is being dimmed. So,
Mm-hmm.
anyways, we had that conversation. I just told him, like, look, man, I feel like people are happier when you are locked up. I feel like I'm becoming a man, and you would prevent me from becoming the man that I could be. And I don't like the way you talk to your family. And
That's,
he went off. he
I
went
bet.
he went off. I put the phone down, and this is when John Madden on PS2 was real popular. I just put the phone down, and I remember just putting the phone down next to me on my bed, and I could hear it just going, "Arr!" And I'm just playing the game and
Yeah.
waiting for him to stop. Then when I hear the phone, I hear it like stop mumbling,
Yeah.
pick it up. He's like, "You hear me?" Yeah. I'm like, "Yeah, I heard you." And he's like, all right. And he's left. But I didn't hear any of it, to be
Of
honest.
course. Yeah. Yeah.
But his girlfriend told me, because she was there, she said that she's like, your dad, he cried after that phone call. And I
Wow.
was like, oh, you know, I was like, oh, okay. My dad's way more emotional than I am, more emotional than my mom is,
Mm,
but he has, because I've become a man and I work, there's a book called Iron John, and it's called Iron John, a book about men. And
mm,
it talks about how men, it talks about how men need to forgive their fathers, but also they need to embrace their masculinity. The
mhm,
guy who wrote this book, Robert Bly, he wrote this book. He was one of the founders of one of the first male founders of the feminist movement.
mhm,
But he saw how the feminist movement was impacting men emotionally,
mhm,
and in his book, he mentions that men, after the Industrial Revolution, after that happened, we always talk about how women are supposed to be in the household, but before the Industrial Revolution, men and women were in the household.
mhm.
You also had your uncles, your grandfathers, you had um, you had you had your family, you had support from your family within your your local environment.
Yeah.
Everybody's pretty close to each other. But
Yeah.
once the Industrial Revolution happened, men left the households, men left to go to cities, etc. So young boys grew up with their mothers primarily, and then went to school, and then they had female teachers. So over time, men got their sense of self or sense of validation or acceptance from women.
Yeah.
And it's said that basically men, even though you may have had a good father, a bad father, it's important for you to understand, um, connect with your masculine energy, the
Mhm.
pros and cons with it, and then also to embrace that with other men that you grow, that are your relatives, because they're all dealing with it to some degree.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty good book. Like after I read that book, and I've been working on myself for a number of years, it was easier. My eyes, put it like, the lens had been, I had to replace one lens with another lens, and I
Mhm.
went from seeing my father from not just through a child's eyes, but through a man's
Yeah.
eyes,
Yeah.
and that actually improved our relationship. You know.
That's awesome. Forgiveness is a really tough, tricky thing for a lot of
Mhm,
people. I don't know that I'm at forgiveness yet. I'm
mhm,
definitely at understanding, in that, like I said, I come from a long line of alcoholic, parents. And so he saw what his father did before him, who saw what his father did before him, who saw what his father did before him. And,
mhm.
every one of them did a little better than the one before. Like my dad never hit me, but his dad beat the crap out of him. So, he wore that like a badge of honor that he never beat us. And,
I
and,
had the same
and I'm like,
thing.
cool. Yeah. I'm glad. Thank you. Thank you for leveling up a little bit. Right. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
understand. And,
yeah.
I look at his generation and what was required of him. He was not supposed to teach me how to deal with my feelings. That was not the common cultural thing to do at that point. I was just talking to my mom. I was like, I don't think it was even your job. You guys were in, this middle class 80s family. You had to get food on the table. We were, the wild animals that just got home from school and played until it was dinner time. Like, you were not really raising us as much as the neighborhood was, and our just latchkey kid experience was. So it was just different, right? Where now there's so much emphasis on self-awareness, teaching about not only knowing what your feelings are, but how to articulate them and how to share them with your parent. I mean, my kids, I watch them and I'm stunned at their emotional intelligence, how they can articulate to me things about themselves that I can't articulate about myself. And my 8-year-old blows me away, how she'll just come up to me and say, I'm sad. And I'll say why. And she'll tell me exactly why. And like, literally it is sadness. It's not like the toy broke. Like, it's like she gets to the heart of like, this thing was special to me and now I don't have it. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And we've
Mhm.
come so far. So to your point, like I have understanding, I have compassion for the experiences that our parents had before us. And so, I'm trying to do a little bit better than I did and beat you, and,
It,
raise the bar a little higher for my kids so that they can wear their own badge of
I
honor.
get what you're saying. And it's funny. My dad, the thing that helped me, I want to say, helped me heal the relationship that I had with my father when I had a serious conversation when I was like 22. And the reason I decided to have this conversation, because when I was a kid, he tried to, he tried to discourage me, tried to tell me I wasn't going to amount to anything. But I didn't live in the same household as my dad. But I lived, I lived with people who would encourage me and that were, trying to motivate me. So I would just, that didn't really bother me. But I did tell myself when I was a kid that everything he was good at, I was going to be great at, and everything he was bad at, I was going to be good at. That's what I told myself. So that's what I
Yeah.
kind of did to stay focused. But when I was 22, my dad, he called me and he was just complaining about his dad, right?
Mm.
And I was just like listening to him, and I was like, hell no. I was like, I'm not gonna grow up and have a conversation with my son and then telling him, about how shitty my dad was.
Yeah.
I knew that a part of, just like I said, a part of the process, not just being better than him at the things that he was bad at. I knew that I had to forgive. I knew that for me to be better than my dad, this was something I had to get over. I had to forgive him for.
Yeah.
So I decided to have a serious conversation with him, and I put it all out there, and I just like, hey, this is how I feel, yada yada. I said everything, and he just apologized, and he said, man, you know what? I'm sorry. I just wasn't that good of a father. And then it kind of dawned on me that he was the best father that he could be. Like
Mhm.
my dad is wired differently than me. Like his
Yep.
mom is off the hook. My grandmother, that's no longer here, God bless her, she was crazy, man. And he got a little bit of her. So
Yep. Yep.
he's not like her,
Yeah.
but it's just the truth. It's real. And my father, his father, I only met him twice, and I flew out to Wichita because he was dying of cancer, right?
Mm.
And he had got out of prison after he had spent 25 years of his life in prison.
Mm.
And I went to see him, and before when he got out, he wanted to talk to me, and I didn't know what to say to him. So I just
Yeah.
said honestly, man, I heard all the bad things you did. I really don't have the patience to really be phony. That's what I told him. I just don't have the patience to be phony, man. So
Yeah.
can you just let me know everything? This is what I heard. Can you let me know what's true or not? He admitted to everything, and he was like, he just he was it was funny because he was a good person growing up. He was really, when I went to his funeral, because he died, he grew up in a small town, so people that he grew up with in this small town from his high school, a lot of people came to his funeral.
Yeah.
And he just lost himself at some point in time. Like he
Yeah.
left his home little town in Oklahoma and came to California, got caught up in the fast life, and he lost who he was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and it was crazy. His last years, he was nothing like the person that I had heard about. My dad, he still cries about his dad because they didn't have a good relationship, but he wishes that they did.
Yeah.
And he always, when he brings him up, he cries and he talks about just like, man, that person that you met in Kansas, that's who my dad really was, man.
Mm.
That's who he really was. Like he was in deep thought. He was quiet. I can tell he was like really thinking about his life, his decisions. He accepted the fact that he was going to be dying soon. He had a slow death. He died
Mm.
5 years of cancer, and he was slowly dying. So it, my point is that I don't know, man. I think that I don't know. I just wanted to share that because I thought that for me, healing with my dad, and then also I wanted to go see my grandfather before he died because I wanted to get something. I didn't want him
Yeah.
to die without me having a conversation with him. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
I wanted to look in his eyes. I wanted to see his face. I wanted to see what I can get from this interaction. Sometimes those moments that you share, you get something from it, whether you're aware of it in that moment or not.
Yeah. And I think what you got was to see the real man. And like you said, we all get lost at some point in this journey. None of us sets out to be a terrible parent or a bad person in any way, but choices lead to other choices, and sometimes those choices are pretty desperate ones, and you get stuck in this life. That's an extreme example, like the situation you're talking about people being in prison. Like that's one extreme. The other extreme is the person who is the super high powered executive whose life is completely empty because the choices they made them a lot of money but put them in a different kind of trap. And it's just this hamster wheel that we're on of just trying to keep up, trying to do whatever's right, try to just get by in this life that just puts us into some bad situations, sometimes much worse than others. Unfortunately, it affects some groups of people much more disproportionately than others. And so I'm sorry you went through that, and I'm glad you had that experience though, to be able to see, the person underneath the story that he built for himself, to give you a better, I guess, idea of really where you come from.
It's just life, you
Yeah,
know.
man.
We have crossroads, and we walk down one road, and it leads us to whatever path that leads to.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, in doing this, since you've been doing this, like what are the most common issues that you found that men who kind of followed the same steps that basically both of us have followed, go to
Yeah.
get the education, we got to make money, we have to be the provider, but they've done everything society has told them to do, but they're still
Mhm.
not happy. Like what do they feel is missing?
I think for a lot of them, it comes down to purpose. That's kind of the big underlying current. I see it a lot. It's just like, what is the point of all of this? You can believe a lot of different things about that, but if there's not something driving you toward something more meaningful than a paycheck, then it can be a pretty hollow existence. I think a lack of curiosity about why you do the things you do is kind of what puts you into that trap. I see. I talk about myself. I can talk about people all day long and talk about myself. I struggle with food issues, and a lot of times I'll have feelings that I don't want to deal with, and I'll go try to solve them in the pantry.
Hmm.
And as long as I ask myself, "What the hell am I doing here? Am I actually hungry, or am I sad, frustrated, bored, annoyed, whatever?" And that answer can help lead me to a better choice. But a lot of times we aren't curious enough to get to the answer to that question, and we'll just sort of on autopilot keep doing the same things over and over again. I got bad feelings, let's pour some booze on them. I got bad feelings, let's eat something. I don't want to deal with people, I'm going to work from home and never go outside. Like, there's all these choices that we make, but we're not curious about why are we making them, and why are we repeating them and ending up with a bad result and then just complaining about it. So I think those are some of the biggest issues, is you know that, and I think a lack of appreciation for the hard work that we do. I think that there are a lot of pressures that guys face that go unnoticed, that go unappreciated, that go unspoken of, because guys aren't typically doing it for the accolades. They're doing it because the job's got to get done. And after a
Yeah.
long enough period of time, the reward typically comes from the boss, right? The boss is like, "Hey, attaboy, here's a raise, here's a promotion." So guys lean into that because that's where they're getting the reward. But if at home they're not hearing, "Hey, thanks for," or "I appreciate you doing that for us," or "I see how hard you're working to be a better person." Like, when you don't hear that, and you rely on the external validation, then it's easy to become the work obsessed person, because that's where you're getting the external validation. So I think that's it, right? Like, it's purpose, it's curiosity, and where you get that validation from. Can you get it internally, or do you need someone else to provide it for you? And whatever the answer is, like, being able to adapt to it appropriately.
Men are self-sacrificing.
Yeah.
You know, what you just stated reminded me of a conversation I had with a good friend of mine about a few months ago, almost a year ago. And I was telling him that I was seeing a woman, and then I made her. She was upset with me, and I was down, right? And so I had a
Mhm.
conversation with him, and then literally the next day, things are way better. So I had to, so I was conscious of how I was feeling when I was down, and then I realized the next day that I was feeling way better. She was happier, I was better, and I called my friend. I was like, "Hey man, I need to speak to you. I want to. I really need to get this out."
Yeah.
And I explained to him what had just happened, and I said, "Man, it just dawned on me that you'll never be happy placing your happiness on other people, on your kids, your spouse, you know, anything outside of you, because the
Yeah.
world is going to rock you and people are going to rock you. So you need to do whatever you need to do to make sure that you're happy with who you are. Because I've done that before. I've done that. I felt like, oh, I'm doing these things, so this person will see the things that I'm doing. Not necessarily relationship based. It can be family.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm doing these things, and these people, they will appreciate it because I'm thinking like, oh, they'll appreciate it, they'll be grateful, etc. But it's not the case, and it doesn't make those people bad people. It's just, people have their own agendas, their own problems, they're in their own heads. And um and when you put yourself in that self-sacrificing position, it's like I don't know, it's like what I could see it as is like a Dead Souls, was a Dark Souls character. Like you have a life bar, and you slowly like lose
Yeah.
life,
Yeah.
because you're putting your life into other people's hands, basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at how we're raised. Like we go to school and we're graded on our performance, and we get the attaboy for doing a good job, and we're punished for doing a bad job.
Hmm.
You get your allowance for doing your chores around that. Like we I think a lot of us were taught growing up to seek the approval, the validation from someone else. Someone else has to rubber stamp that you did a good job. And so when all of a sudden you're on your own and there's nobody else to provide that, you're not in an automatic situation where you get rewarded. Work is kind of all that's left. And if you work for somebody, that's where that goes. And I think for men especially that we do that. And so that's why I think you do see a lot of these corporate, CEO kind of people that go on our shows like ours and say, I did it all. I burned the candle at both ends and I had everything and I was miserable. And it's because
Hmm.
they were constantly seeking someone else to say, good job. And they never looked inside to say, hey, good job with your life.
Yeah, good point. Good point, man. What I was gonna say, have you ever suffered with not feeling good enough?
Yeah, most of my life.
Okay. Okay, because
Yeah,
I
I mean,
I've dealt with that in my own way. That's why I was curious.
yeah, I mean, like I said, that voice in my head that I was actually able to eradicate. I remember the last time I had it, and it was I went to visit. I went to my hometown to visit, and like literally, I had to work up until the minute I had to be in the car and on the road. Is a 3 hour drive home, and I got to my mom's house. And I was staying there, and I think it was like that night. I went to like brush my teeth, and I opened up my bag to get my stuff out, and I forgot my toothbrush. I was like, God, you're such an idiot. How could you forget something so simple? Like you're not a full grown adult. Like started beating myself up for this simple thing that I forgot my toothbrush. But in the middle of the thought, I caught it and went, wait, no, you literally worked until the minute you had to be in the car. You were busy. You forgot you're a human being. Stop complaining. Open the drawer. There's probably a spare. And of course there was. That was the standard. Like that was the soundtrack in my head of everything I did. I would do interviews like this and I would get off going like, you completely bombed that. You sucked. That was terrible. I would record podcasts and go, that was garbage. Nobody's ever going to listen to that. And then I'd get, a bunch of emails saying how awesome it was. Like the bar I set for myself is, or was, you're garbage, you're not good enough, you're barely lucky enough to take up space in the world. And so that's been the majority of the work these last couple of years, is learning to take up space and to be okay with the fact that I'm not going to be perfect when I do take up that space. It's new for me. And yeah, it's tough. I we were just joking on the last show on how much less I hate myself now than I used to,
Mhm.
because of a lot of work. I think that fear of when I was a kid and the experiences we talked about was something that just carried with me, and I just wanted to hide and stay under the radar and stay safe and never get out of my comfort zone. And it was sort of at the beginning of this where I learned that getting uncomfortable is the way. Like when I face those challenges, those obstacles, and get over them, the reward is on the other side of them. And so yeah, the not being good enough was pretty much the soundtrack of my life.
What where did you get the name, man? Fit Mess. Like, how did you come up with that?
It was actually my co-host, his now ex-wife. We were developing the show and trying to come up with, because we're not, credentialed, certified,
You don't have
therapists.
to
Like,
be.
yeah,
I
you
don't
don't have
like
to be.
sorry to cut you off, but
No, please.
I hate that when I go to any YouTube podcast. That's what I like about Joe Rogan's podcast. What I used to like about it. It was just two guys
Hmm.
having a conversation. Now
Yep.
every podcast I see is like this PhD, this
Right.
psychoanalyst, and they all rotate through the same podcast. I'm like,
Yep.
damn, like every dating coach now is not even a regular guy. It's like some it's like some PhD
Right.
do that did research 50 books. Like it's not that difficult, man.
Right. I know. That's the thing. It's really not. Uh, oh, sorry. I lost my train of thought with that.
The Fit Mess, you said that
No,
your
the title.
co-host did
Yes.
it. He got
Yes.
divorced. Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
So my buddy and I were trying to come up with the name of this show where, we were sort of on these journeys around the same time and kind of learning from each other and having conversations much like the one you and I are having. And he was the one that was like, hey, we should do a podcast about this because, I don't hear guys talking like this. And I think it could be helpful for guys to hear this. And I thought he was nuts because we didn't have the credentials. But then as I sort of looked around, I was like, you're right. I mean, our conversations are helping me. Why couldn't help somebody else? So we were trying to figure out like what's the way to say we have some advice, but it's completely unqualified. So take it for what it's worth. And we bounced a bunch of terrible ideas off of each other. And finally, his wife walks by and she just goes, "Why don't you idiots just call it the fit mess?" And we're like, "Yeah, that's solid. Let's do that."
Well, it's a good title, man. I was looking like, damn, that's pretty creative.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll let her know.
On your show, I'm curious, like what guest like stands out to you? I'm sure you've had a lot of great shows, but I'm sure there's been a guest that told you a story that hit you so deep that it resonated with you. Like, what guest was that, and like,
Yeah,
what
I
was the
mean,
experience like?
there's a lot of analogies that have stuck with me. One was a guy named Chris Duffin, world champion weightlifter guy, and I loved his analogy about how going through life is like a tree. Like you have to build really strong roots to face the strongest. Like it's the strongest winds that build the strongest roots, right? Like the trees that are standing the tallest and the longest have been there and they've faced the winds. And so I really like that analogy for life of just like you don't get those deep roots without that strong wind blowing against you. That one stands out. The probably my favorite author is Ryan Holiday. He writes about Stoic philosophy. We were able to talk to him about one of his books. That was mind blowing. When we were early on, we were really into biohacking specifically as a genre. So we were talking a lot about that. We talked to Dave Asprey, kind of the godfather of biohacking, a couple of times. The guy that, I mean, there's two people probably that changed my life the most. And one was Tony Horton, the creator of the P90X workout. I remember interviewing him and I had just started doing his workout like the week before because I knew I was going to be interviewing him. And I hated going to the gym. I was every time I was there, like, do I really want to look back on my life and all the hours I will have spent in this room doing this? This is awful. And so I went to him in a call like this and I said, I hate it. How do I change that? And he looked me in the eye through Zoom and said, dude, your purpose sucks. That's all it is. You don't have a good enough reason to go. Like as soon as you have a good enough reason, then that's all going to change. And
Mhm.
he was totally right. I mean, it took me a while to find it, but that was it. I needed somebody to tell me it's not about the thing; it's about the reason you're doing the thing. And it was another one of those things where he said it the right way at the right time, and it clicked. But I mean, honestly, it was a guy that most people probably haven't heard of. Was my own coach. I had him on the show, and it was really the talk we had offline. But uh, he's just a really smart guy and a really down to earth like you're saying, this isn't rocket science. It's consistency. It's showing up every day and doing the hard work. Like there's no magic pill. There's no secret formula. There's no thing that you're going to find in a book that's going to necessarily blow you away unless it's the thing that you've probably read 30 times and you just needed to read it the right way at the right time for it to finally click and make sense for you. So those are some of the folks that we've talked to that have had a pretty big impact on me.
You know, people have. Well, I've had a few like friends. They said like, "Oh, you're stoic," and I didn't know what the hell that was, to be honest,
Mm,
man. And I'm just really down to earth. I'm just chill.
yeah.
So I invested time into Marcus Aurelius. I actually bought his
Hmm.
book. I have it right here. What is it called? I can't even read it.
Meditations.
Yeah, I have it. I
Yeah.
have meditation. It has like that crow or bird on the cover or something like that.
Nice. Yeah.
But yeah, I have the book Meditations, and he says some pretty some of the quotes that he says like really speaks to me or whatnot. And basically, I'm curious, like, why did you get into Stoicism? Like, what do you get from it?
I think it's really just learning to accept what's in your control and what's not. I mean, at the root of it, that's the thing that stands
Mhm.
out the most to me is like, I can sit here and get mad if somebody dumps a bunch of trash on my front lawn, or I can just go do something about it. Right. Like it's not my fault that it's there, but it's my responsibility to clean it up. So it's really just kind of owning my part in the world and what I control and how I respond to the things that happen to me. Um, this a bit of a tangent, but it's funny we're talking about Marcus Aurelius. I was just in Rome with my daughters, and my youngest daughter's 8. And again, Ryan Holiday, he wrote 3 children's books, and one of them is about Marcus Aurelius. And so we're going through the Vatican City Museum, and we're seeing all these busts everywhere. And finally, and the whole time, again, being the self-sacrificer, I want to find some Marcus Aurelius stuff. We're in Rome, I want to find some, but I'm like, we'll just do what the family wants to do. My 8-year-old in the Vatican City Museum says, "Where's Marcus Aurelius stuff? I want to see Marcus Aurelius." And I was like, my 8-year-old daughter wants to see it. This is awesome. So we get on the phone. I find we happen to be in the room like 6 feet away from the bust of him at like 19 years old. So I was like the super proud, like dad moment that my 8-year-old even put together that we're in the city where Marcus Aurelius, was king and like did all these things. And so we did that. And then we actually found the tower that was built in honor of his time as a general. So it's just, it's just cool to like have really Ryan Holiday's work through Marcus Aurelius have an impact on me. But then to have my 8-year-old, also sort of pick up those lessons and be interested in them was a really cool moment. But
Wait, so you said you guys were in Italy?
yeah.
Okay. And and then this was in Rome?
Yeah, it was in the Vatican, in the
Okay.
Vatican Museum. Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
real cool. I've been to
Yeah.
Italy, but I haven't been to Southern Italy where all the history. I was in Northern, just visiting a friend from college. Wasn't that
Nice.
exciting.
It's
You know?
beautiful. We were in northern and southern Italy. We skipped the middle, but beautiful place.
Is it the cathedral? Cool. I took a picture next to this like huge. He was like, "D, you have to take a picture next to this like castle, a church." That's what it was. It was a church in Milan. I can't remember the name of that church.
In Milan. I don't know about Milan, but no, we did not go to that church.
Do you know a church I'm talking? There's like a famous huge church. I don't know the name.
I'm thinking of the one in Barcelona.
Okay.
La Sagrada Familia, the big Gaudi designed church, but that's probably a different one than the one you're talking about because we were in Barcelona and Italy. Sorry to turn it into travel talk.
No, it's cool, man. I don't mind. I just want to I want these podcasts to be more like a conversation.
Cool.
Where people, I can ask them questions, they ask me questions.
Yeah.
One thing you said is accepting things that you cannot change.
Yeah.
I was just in Colorado. I compete in karate. So I was in Colorado
nice.
for a tournament, right? And my sensei is he's in his 70s, old dude. And we were sitting at the airport last night. We flew in. I literally got home at like 2 a.m. last night.
Oh man.
And we were at the airport and I was telling him a story of mine that I was at the hotel I was staying at. And there was like a drink case, like a freezer where it has like all the the smoothies, the sodas, the waters, etc.
Yeah.
So I tried to open it to get a smoothie, and it wouldn't open. It was like locked. And the woman was like, "Hold on, wait, I got to get that for you." So she walked around to the back and got the smoothie, and then she brought it to me, and I started cracking up. Right, and I had to ask her, I was like, "Do people really grab drinks out the freezer and then take off?" And this was a nice hotel. And she said, "Yes, people actually do that." And I just start cracking up, right? Because not just because of that situation, but then I've had people that I've gave opportunities to that have screwed me over in some kind of way, bad mouth me. And then when she told me that story, I mean, when she told me that, when she told that to me, what immediately came to my mind was like, human beings are so unique. Like we forget that we're animals. We have this idea that we're so above, high almighty. Some of us way more articulate than others. Some of us, we try to put on a face and dress a certain way. But at the end of the day, when we when we have that impulse, some of us just respond differently. And the people that steal these drinks aren't necessarily kids. Some of them are like professionals who can afford the drink.
Right, totally.
Like, what the hell?
It reminds me of my movie theater days when I used to watch full-grown adults like they buy a ticket, go to one movie, and then sneak into another, and we wouldn't do anything about it because it was like, you're an adult, you know what you're doing. Like me telling you this is not right is not going to change you as a person. What is wrong with you?
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, I've done that, but I haven't.
Oh, me too. Who has it? That's what you do.
I can't say I've done it actually in my adult life. I have not done that recently. I can't say, but I definitely high school and before that, I definitely did that all the time. Have your friend open up the back. But anyways, Jeremy, we're close to the end, and I usually ask people this question at the end of my show, like, what is their philosophy for life?
What is my philosophy for life? I mean, I think I can wrap it up in what I said about just my purpose is that, I just want to be here I want my actions to help people suffer less. If I can do that, then I feel like it's a win and it's a pretty rewarding life. And by doing so, I want to do it in a way that acknowledges my responsibility for my actions and the impact they have on other people. And so, yeah, I mean, just that, and just try to be a little better. Like whatever I did yesterday, I'm going to try and do a little better today, and whatever I do today, I want to do a little better tomorrow. There's lots of different ways to measure that and what that means to you, but just setting that small goal is a lot easier than shooting for the moon and having a hard time getting the bicycle off the ground to fly without ET. So that's a really old reference. I can't believe I just made an ET reference, but yeah, that's it, man. It's just everything comes down to the small, consistent little actions that you do every day, and if you're taking them in the right direction, then you're going to get there.
Have you ever watched the podcast Diary of a CEO?
No.
Okay, well, one thing that he does at the end of his podcast, he asks his guests to ask a question for the next guest. I had never done it before, but I think this would be pretty cool to try out. So,
question for the next guest.
So you
and do I get to know who the next guest is, or it's just a random?
It's going to be a random guest.
Random
you
thing.
just ask the question, then this person can answer it.
Oh man, I shouldn't do this, but this is where my brain wants to go, and it's good. It could be horribly embarrassing or wildly entertaining. I used to do a comedy podcast, and we had we had two questions. I'm going to give you one of the two that we asked every single guest, and it was, have you ever pooped your pants? And if so, there needs to be a story. And so I'm going to give you that. You can use it. You cannot use it. I'm going to let you decide. But it usually ended in a pretty entertaining story. So there's a question for you.
Okay, I'm going to ask that question. We'll see how it goes, man.
Blame me when they look at you sideways and it completely derails the conversation. I didn't want to ask this question. I had this idiot on my podcast that wanted to know. So
I think I'm gonna create a YouTube short or something with you asking the question and them answering it.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'll take the blame, man. I'll take the hit for that one.
All right, Jeremy. Thank you. This was a great conversation. And hopefully we could do something like this again in the future.
Sounds good, man. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for having me on.
Have a good one. Take care.
You too.